George Russell's new F1 deal with Mercedes has finally been announced, but it's best described as a mutual piece of bet hedging that could still leave both parties free to do something different for 2027. After years when the likes of Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen, in theory at least, were being tied down to very long-term deals with their employers, this Russell announcement feels like a massive outlier, with its implication that they're only committing to each other for a single season. We understand that Mercedes and Russell's contract does actually run on into 2027 despite how it's been presented. The team's official announcement, which also confirms that Kimi Antonelli will stay on for next year, only mentions 2026 for both drivers. True, it doesn't outright say that Russell's contract is for 1 year only, but Mercedes could easily have specifically said that Russell will be there in 2027, and it hasn't. The fact it's taken until October to finalise this deal doesn't necessarily mean Russell and Mercedes had short-term doubts about each other. They've said the delay has just been about finalising small details such as marketing days. Russell wasn't looking at any other teams for 2026, and at least once Verstappen was firmly off the table in the short term, Mercedes wasn't looking at any other drivers, so there was no hurry to sort the small print. The greater interest was always going to be how long Mercedes tied both Russell and Antonelli down for, and that's not immediately obvious. There's not even the classic press release phrasing get out of referring to a multi-year deal, just some into 2026 phrasing. How long Russell actually stays put has big implications for the wider driver market merry-go-round for 2027. Ahead of the huge uncertainty about how much F1's 2026 rules revolution will shake up the grid, teams and drivers have obviously been weighing up how much freedom they want to give themselves for the longer term. A 1-year deal has value in keeping options open for 2027, while a longer contract has the benefits of added security. A rolling 1 year at a time contract for a still unproven young driver in 19-year-old Antonelli's position makes sense. A pure single season extension for an experienced frontrunner like 27-year-old 5-time Grand Prix winner Russell would be unusual, especially given how Mercedes usually handles its driver deals. Russell's last new contract in 2023 committed him to the end of 2025. While Russell's deal length was not explicitly announced, the race understands that his new contract is a multi-year agreement that does indeed run into 2027. The reason that length has not been detailed in public is that Mercedes does not want to get dragged into the specifics of the contract length and end up fueling wider speculation surrounding other drivers. Though good luck with that, because only mentioning 2026 for now is going to make a lot of people put the words Verstappen, Mercedes and 2027 together straight away. Despite the actual contract covering multiple years, leaving 2027 out of its public phrasing is a piece of brutal pragmatism from Mercedes and Russell alike. With so much up in the air for next year and F1's biggest ever rule changes, circumstances could change and both parties could see things very differently in 12 months' time. That's particularly true from Russell's side. While many tip Mercedes to do what it did in 2014 and steal a march on everyone when the new cars and particularly engines arrive, there's no guarantee of that. And from Mercedes' point of view, who knows which other top drivers might be scouring their long contracts for exit clauses if their teams mess up the new rules. So what is true now may not be correct in the future, just as Lewis Hamilton never saw out the 2-year contract that Mercedes announced for him for 2024 and 2025. Both Mercedes and Russell would like nothing more than to win world championships together, but to do that they both need to be performing at their peak and fully believe in each other to deliver. They are very much aligned on this right now, but 2026 is promising such a shake-up that it is in the interest of everybody to accept that perceptions could easily change. Drivers only want to be locked in at competitive teams. Teams only want drivers on board who are performing to their best. This, above all else, decides how partnerships develop, much more than the official length of contracts. Speaking earlier this year about the length of the deal he wanted from Mercedes, Russell said that everything rested on what happened on track, and that the duration of any contract was ultimately just a number. The example of Sergio Perez, who signed a multi-year Red Bull contract extension during 2024, then was dropped at the end of the season and only made it even that far after a mid-season reprieve, shows how contracts can sometimes be made just to be broken. So it's clearly in both Russell and Mercedes' interest to be realistic and open-minded about the long-term future, especially as F1's driver market silly season could kick off dramatically in 2026. From Mercedes' perspective, it's been no secret that it's keeping a close eye on Verstappen and how things shake out with his F1 future at Red Bull. Verstappen is in theory locked down at Red Bull until the end of 2028, but it's understood that he has exit clauses in his contract that allow him to leave if certain performance targets are not hit. It was the possibility of him being a free agent for next year if he was not in the top 3 of the Drivers' Championship by the 2025 summer break that triggered Mercedes scouting out its options earlier on in this campaign. And Mercedes boss Toto Wolff will be well aware that Verstappen's exit clause puts even bigger demands on Red Bull's side next year. If he is outside the top 2 in the championship by the 2026 summer break, then he would have the right to leave. With someone like Verstappen potentially up for grabs, it would make no sense for Mercedes to have no space available. And from Russell's perspective, he's entering the peak phase of his career, and there's an attraction from his side too in keeping options open for the future. He may have been a Mercedes junior driver since 2017, but as a proven race winner, he will be an obvious target for other teams. There's plenty of scope with the 2026 rules shake-up for some shocks, and a team that is not on many people's radar as a dream destination might suddenly find itself as a key target. Adrian Newey's first car at Aston Martin could be sensational, and Fernando Alonso is near the end of his career, which could leave a vacancy there for 2027. Plus, if Verstappen is on the move, then as a consistent race winner, Russell will be an obvious target for Red Bull, though this would probably mean that in 2026 at least, Red Bull is doing worse than Mercedes, otherwise Verstappen wouldn't be leaving. There are a lot of moving factors surrounding this all right now, and the future prospects and lineups are all wide open up and down the grid. It's obvious Mercedes and Russell's dream is that the journey they started together nearly 10 years ago when he became a Mercedes Junior ends in F1 title glory together. But F1 rarely works out that neatly. Russell recently said, "I'm 28 next year, I'm still feeling pretty young, but at some point I need to make sure everything is right and we're all heading in the right direction." A lot could change in 2026, but right now, Russell looks a lot more attractive to other F1 teams than Mercedes looks to other F1 drivers. The once dominant team has never got on top of this generation of ground effect cars. It's only won 7 Grand Prix in nearly 4 years. That's even fewer than Ferrari. Russell's responsible for 5 of those victories, and over 2025 he's truly become the F1 driver Mercedes needed him to be after Hamilton's departure. By every reasonable metric, Russell's been a team-leading top-level driver in 2025, and made sure Mercedes has had the North Star on track that Hamilton was for so long. Though Russell's potential is what marked him out as Hamilton's heir apparent at Mercedes for many years, there's a difference between being fast enough to lead a team and producing the performances required to do it. He feels that comes from finally being much more relaxed in his driving and approach to race weekends, and that's meant he's cut the errors that have previously dogged him. At times, alongside 7-time F1 World Champion Hamilton, Russell was guilty of either overreaching or losing focus. Gambling on the wrong tyres in Canada qualifying in 2022, hitting the wall in that race a year later, the 2023 Singapore crash are obvious examples. Sometimes those moments could be brushed off as just one of those things. Sometimes Russell would justify a roll of the dice by saying he wants to win, and as that's not always possible for Mercedes, when it's there it's better to go for it and risk it backfiring. Putting on slicks for the start at Silverstone this year did still fall into that category, but that was a joint call with Mercedes that they shared responsibility for. The important thing is Russell getting out of the habit of wanting to take a needless gamble or making a needless mistake. That seems to have happened. He is, by and large, much more in control of the controllables. Last season hinted that Russell made a good step towards being a more robust, rounded and dependable driver. Being paired with Antonelli would prove that one way or the other. If Russell failed, he'll be undermined as a team leader and displaced as Mercedes' next big thing all in one go. This year has brought more of the same from Mercedes' performance. Good weekends, bad weekends, the occasional moment of outright superiority. Russell's own performance within that has been outstanding, and this is undoubtedly his best season in F1 yet, not just in terms of outright results, but consistency of execution. The peaks always come first for talented drivers who find themselves in good machinery. It's the consistency that top teams crave, the assurance that week in, week out their driver will be one of the very best performers. Maybe it has taken a year or two longer than his initial trajectory suggested, but Mercedes has been able to count on Russell being exactly that in 2025. It can be pretty confident he'll bring more of the same, or even better, in 2026 and beyond. But from Mercedes' side, does that make Russell a Verstappen beater? And from Russell's side, when is Mercedes going to live up to the standard of the drives that Russell's now producing? And that's why, although the word 2027 is there on the paperwork that Russell signed, it's totally absent from the announcement of their new deal.